That's very well stated. And you mentioned something there that leads into our very next question, where we're getting tons of concerns about is taxes. You mentioned about debt payments and if what that happens with rising interest rates. But it seems and appears that tax increases are inevitable. Do you agree with that? And if so, do you think we should be worrying about rising debt issues and what higher taxes are going to mean for the markets?
So let me go one slide above and we'll talk about the debt and I'll talk about taxes separately. Let's look at our debt. And I do think that in the financial world, context always matters. And so what we've done here is compared on the far left-hand side of the bar, the impact on the economy that the great financial crisis had relative to COVID. And that's blue and orange respectively. You can see the great financial crisis, in fact, took a much bigger chunk out of our economy than COVID did. Why? Because of the amount of monies that were spent to hold back the bottom from dropping out. And that's precisely the next set of bars you see, which is during the great financial crisis, the Fed and the stimulus that was spent was roughly 4% of the size of our economy, versus at COVID, it's 20% of the size of our economy. So certainly this has taken the debt. The entire US economy is roughly 20 trillion. We've spent 5 trillion so far. That's the 20% number you see. And as such, it's taken our debt to GDP to 100% for the very first time since World War II. But when you look at that number, again, it only paints one half of the picture. So one side of the coin. The other side of the coin that's equally important, and one of the reasons that markets aren't freaking out, is because the chart on the right-hand side. The red line depicts the debt, and you can see, yes, that has risen, but look at the yellow line. That's the interest we pay on our debt. And despite our debt being much higher, the net interest cost we pay is much lower. Think of this like an adjustable rate mortgage. So if you're going to buy a house, a more expensive house, which seems to be the natural course today, if you get an adjustable rate mortgage, you can buy that bigger house because your monthly nut is lower. Same example to how the Fed is looking at our debt. So this is essentially allowing the Fed to kick the can down the road. It doesn't change the scenario, but it allows for a little bit more breathing room as the economy grows to pay for some of this debt. Inevitably, though, it will lead to higher taxes. I think that at this point, we can all agree that higher taxes are in the realm. What I don't have in this particular presentation, but I do have a separate article that I wrote about, is we looked at, and this is fascinating, we looked at the last 13 times the US economy experienced tax increases across corporate, personal, and capital gains. And in 12 out of the 13 times that these taxes went up in one way or the other, stock markets went up. If you're thinking that sounds wrong, taxes, yes, they're a burden to stocks. However, they don't happen in isolation. Typically, when taxes are being raised, that's also being pumped with some type of stimulus. In the past, it was defense spending and or some type of social governance spending. I think today there is no shortage of some type of stimulus or the other. And so it's very hard to use taxes as a predictor of where stock market returns will be in a given calendar year. I'll give a very specific example. The last time capital gains went up was in 2013. It went up by 9 percentage points to 25%, and then was cut in 2017. The stock market in 2013 did a whopping 30%. Why? Because something else was taking place. So the story in short is that yes, taxes are important, but they're not a good predictor of what calendar year stock returns are going to do. So don't make big rash decisions based just on that headline story alone. So hopefully you get a bit of a sense of where the debt is. Yes, it's rising, but it's manageable given where interest costs are today. And second, simply don't draw a conclusion that higher taxes should mean doom for stocks. Historically, that's not necessarily been the case.